The first word my daughter offered a stranger at 30,000 feet wasn't hello or thanks. It was Angel. Paper thin, almost imaginary, breathed out as a flight attendant lifted a plastic fork toward Harper's mouth. I would have blamed cabin noise and grief for the hallucination if the attendant hadn't heard it too, and smiled like someone recognizing a language she hadn't spoken in years. We were 3 hours into the Tokyo-San Francisco red-eye. The aisle lights a soft runway of permission for people who needed excuses to stand. Harper hadn't eaten since the last airport. She hadn't spoken since the accident. She occupied her seat like a lighthouse that had gone dark. Still beautiful. Still itself. Just not in service. The tray in front of her was a still life. Sealed juice, a napkin folded into an obedient triangle, a cooling rectangle of pasta under fogging foil. My own tray had become a filing cabinet for my worst ideas. Emails I wasn't reading, spreadsheets I didn't need, a life that had kept insisting if I outran pain, I'd eventually lap it. The attendant crouched to Harper's eye level and peeled back the foil without fanfare. No clinical pep talk, no weaponized cheer. She cut a bite in half, then half again, and waited like patience could be offered on a fork. "She hasn't been eating," I said, because facts felt safer than hope. "That's okay," she answered, attention steady, voice pitched for one small person and the man who had run out of strategies. "Just a nibble. It can be a no." The plane hummed, a baby protested sleep 2 rows back. Ice clinked in a glass, as if someone had decided to make weather with cubes. Harper stared at the fork. She did not look at me. For months I had been a force field of worry, visible, humming, terrible for plants. She leaned forward by degrees and took the tiniest bite as if testing ocean temperature with a toe. Chew, pause, swallow. The world did not burst into birdsong. The captain did not announce a miracle. Inside me, something unknotted anyway. "Angel," Harper breathed. The attendant's face tilted. The smile that arrived wasn't triumphant. It was reverent, like being trusted with a newborn or a secret. "Close," she murmured. "Just Alina." "But thank you." Alina. A name that didn't try to sell anything. She offered another small forkful, then a sip of juice, then a napkin to chase a red smear from Harper's lip. All of it quiet, competent, without the performance of kindness that had been exhausting my days. I didn't know where to put my hands. Gratitude made them awkward, and for a year my usefulness had been measured in money and logistics. I had flown us here because movement was my last idea. If the scenery changed, perhaps the story would agree to a rewrite. But the first draft of Mercy showed up in an aisle, in a woman's kneel. By the time the cabin lights dimmed to suggest sleep, Harper had eaten enough to not be hungry, which was more than nothing and exactly everything. She placed her stuffed bunny, gray, love-balled in places, between her head and the window, angled the ear like a shade, and slumped gently into the kind of rest that made her face look less like a person learning to be brave and more like a child. Alina eased the tray table up and locked it without making authority of the click. "Thank you," I managed when she rose. "You're welcome," she said simply, then glanced not at me but at Harper, as if to acknowledge the party who'd done the hardest work. "Ring if you need me." I didn't. For a while we existed in the shared hush of a moving canister, the Pacific black and foaming below, the little maps on our screens lying nicely about the business of straight lines. I closed the laptop that had been absorbing my face like a mirror for a version of me I didn't like and found. To my surprise, I could leave it shut. When we landed, I should have moved with the efficient remorse of business travelers. Belts clicked, bags hoisted, jokes about making meetings on the other side of customs. Instead, I told Harper, "Wait by the window," and set our carry-on in a position that felt like a promise. She nodded once, serious, the way she'd said "Angel." I walked back against the tide of people who believed a faster exit could improve the day. Alina stood with the rest of the crew, posture even, a professional smile that didn't patronize anyone's arrival. Her hair was swept back in the way form asks of function, and she wore the uniform like an agreement rather than a costume. "Alina," I said, and her name came out like a test I hoped I'd studied for. She turned. "Yes?" "Thank you," I said again. The words small and insufficient but true. She hasn't said anything since. I choked on the date. Grief takes numbers first, then nouns. Since before. She held the silence with me without trying to name it. She said it to herself, Alina said. I just heard. I followed her glance to the window where Harper stood with the bunny's ear crossed, like a seatbelt over its cloth chest. I didn't have a plan, which was new and frightening. Plans had saved me from feeling. They had not saved me at all. I'm in Tokyo for 2 weeks, I blurted. Meetings. I brought her because I didn't know what else to do. I swallowed a pride that had never fed anyone. Could I pay you to... The phrasing tasted wrong. I changed it. Would you consider spending time with her? Not as a nanny. Familiarity. It would be just 3 days. You don't know me, she said. There was no offense in it, just accuracy. I know what I saw, I said, and what she said. Alina looked past me again, to the small figure in the picture window, a child squinting at engines as if looking hard enough might mean understanding how anything that heavy can lift. When she looked back, her face hadn't softened. It had clarified. 3 days, she agreed, if she wants me. She does, I said, the kind of lie that hopes to be forgiven because it is trying to become true. Tokyo received us with rain that rearranged edges into watercolor. The hotel suite was expensive the way museums are expensive. Polished, curated, mildly suspicious of children. I ordered udon from room service because warmth felt like the only thing that might negotiate with a body that had been bracing for a year. Harper climbed onto a stool with her backpack still on, as if the straps could keep the last hour from leaking out. Alina washed her hands, dried them on a napkin she folded into submission, and sat like she belonged without assuming she did. I'm sorry I didn't say goodbye on the jetway, she told Harper, crouching again to fit into the child's horizon. Airports make time behave badly. Harper didn't answer. She took one of the bowls, blew on it with grave care, and let steam touch her face like a blessing. She fished out a noodle, slurped with ceremony, and looked pleased with the gravity of the world. Alina narrated nothing dramatic. This one looks like a rope. This one looks like a question mark, she said. And Harper tried to find those shapes and laughed once, muscle memory waking in the throat. After the bath, brief, negotiable, and teeth, 1, 2, 3. Alina pulled a book from her tote. The cover was a blue bird mid-sky. There were not many words. He got lost in a storm, she read, voice pitched to hold one small listener and one large man pretending to busy himself with towels. But he didn't stop flying, because the sky is too big to stay lost forever. Harper leaned against her with the trust of someone who has occasionally slept on trains. I stood in the doorway and watched my child do the most miraculous thing grief allows. Close her eyes. When she slept for real, breathing even, the bunny's ear pressed like a seal across her palm. Alina and I stepped onto the balcony where Neon wrote untranslatable sentences across glass. She accepted tea. I accepted coffee with the devotion of old mistakes. Why me? She asked at last, not as challenge, but as a person aware of the gravity of being asked to held. You didn't fix her, I said. You kept watch. The words surprised me with their accuracy. My late wife. I stalled, then decided to be specific, as if precision might be a kind of respect. Claire used to say the only thing worse than falling apart is pretending you aren't. I've been pretending. You kneeled in an aisle and didn't ask us to pretend. Alina rested her forearms on the railing, rain thickening into 1,000 small permissions in the street below. My grandmother used to sit in the hall when I couldn't sleep, she said. Back against the wall, soup on the stove, light on even at noon. She called it keeping watch. She glanced at the lit room where Harper's breath made a small tent of the blanket. It's not glamorous, it's the work. I can buy everything except that, I said, which was both an admission and a question. You can learn, she said, and because she didn't smile when she said it, I believed her. The second day began with a frying pan that wasn't strictly designed for pancakes and an ambition that outran my talent. The first circle folded like a tent. Harper ate it as if accepting a poorly drawn map from a man who finally intended to follow it. We carried umbrellas to a garden behind the hotel where koi nosed the surface like opinions, and Alina pointed out the brightest one, Lantern, she named him, because once you name courage, children can call it by something besides fear. Back upstairs, Harper drew a bird that looked, at first, like a lopsided V, and then, with confidence, like something nearly airborne. She pressed the crayon hard, carving the impression through the paper onto the table, and I resisted the urge to protect furniture over proof. At noon, she retrieved a photograph from beneath her pillow. Claire in a hospital bed, hair chaotic with triumph, eyes like someone who had just found a door she didn't know she was looking for. Harper, miniature and outraged. Me, reduced to a blur of love and terror. "Mommy," Harper said, and did not disintegrate. Neither did I. "Claire," I answered, because pretending not to own names had not saved me, and Harper nodded as if I had finally read the sign correctly. That night, when the city doused and the room dimmed, I told Alina at the door, 3 days, and she echoed it with the small solemnity of a vow that knows its size and still matters. I didn't know that she would leave on the 4th morning, a note under an empty mug like a white flag that said something about courage and ground. I didn't know that Harper would test the word always against absence and find it brittle. I didn't know we would chase a uniform through Narita's bright lungs and learn that angels don't need planes to land. I only knew this. A stranger had knelt in an aisle and taught my daughter, and me, the first line of a new language. It began with a word small enough to fit in a child's mouth and large enough to rewrote the map. Angel, Harper had said, and I had heard finally what she meant. Safe. The rain in Tokyo was steady the next morning, soft enough to listen to, strong enough to stay. Elliot woke before dawn, startled by the sound of quiet that wasn't hollow for once. Harper was still asleep, her bunny tucked under her chin, the faintest hint of a smile at the corner of her mouth. He hadn't seen that expression since before Claire's accident. For months, she had worn silence like armor. Now, even in sleep, she looked lighter, less like someone holding her breath beneath grief. Alina was already up. He found her in the kitchenette, barefoot, hair loose from its professional knot, whisking batter with the same calm rhythm she'd used to coax Harper into eating. Pancakes again. The air smelled faintly of vanilla and citrus. "You cook," he said, half surprised. "I improvise," she replied. "Cooking implies I measure things." He smiled despite himself. "Improvising seems to be working." She poured a small circle of batter onto the pan, the sizzle gentle as rain. "Children don't need perfect," she said. "They need real." The word struck deeper than she probably intended. Real. He hadn't been real for a long time, just efficient, polished, marketable, a father who managed grief like a business portfolio, full of spreadsheets and false assurances. Harper appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. When Alina turned, the girl froze for a heartbeat, as if afraid the miracle of the previous day might have been imagined. Then Alina smiled, and Harper's small shoulders dropped with visible relief. "Hungry?" Alina asked. Harper nodded once and climbed onto a stool. She picked up her fork with surprising confidence. "2," she whispered, holding up fingers. "2 pancakes coming up," Alina said, flipping one perfectly golden disc. "With or without honey?" "With," Harper murmured almost shyly. Elliot watched them in silence, every small exchange tightening something loose in his chest. He didn't know whether to be grateful or afraid. Grateful that Harper was opening again, afraid because he didn't understand how to keep it from breaking. They spent the morning in the hotel's small garden, where koi moved beneath the pond's surface like slow brushstrokes. Harper crouched near the water's edge, following a single bright orange fish with her eyes. "That one's brave," Alina said, kneeling beside her. "He keeps going into the deeper side and coming back." "Lantern," Harper said softly. "He shows the way." Elliot, standing behind them, met Alina's gaze. "Lantern," he repeated quietly. "I like that." "She names things easily," Alina said, her tone warm but edged with something sad. "Children always do, when they trust the world to listen." "She didn't used to be like this," he said. "Before Claire died, she was sunlight, loud, fearless." "And afterward?" Alina asked gently. He took a breath that felt like breaking glass. "Afterward, I became noise, and she stopped competing." They walked a little, the rhythm unhurried. Alina stopped beneath a cherry tree, stripped bare of blossoms. Grief is strange, she said. It makes time go wrong. Too fast 1 hour, too slow the next. The only thing you can do is move at a child's speed. They know how to find the right pace. Elliot studied her, wondering how someone so young could speak like that, like someone who'd earned every sentence through fire. You talk like you've done this before? Her mouth tilted in a small private smile. I've been the child, she said. Different story, same storm. That afternoon, Harper drew at the table while Alina read aloud from a book she'd bought in the airport, The Bird Who Lost Its Song. Each time the bird tried to sing, only wind came out. Harper traced the drawing of the bird again and again, filling the wings with color until they seemed ready to move. When Alina reached the final page, she paused. It says the bird remembered the song when he stopped trying to be loud, she read softly. He just listened to the wind, and it carried his music back. Harper whispered, like Mommy's song. Elliot froze. His heart stuttered once, twice. What song, sweetheart? Alina asked. Harper hesitated, biting her lip. The Sunshine one. Elliot's throat closed. He hadn't heard You Are My Sunshine since Claire's funeral. It had been the lullaby she sang to Harper every night, gentle, imperfect, alive. He'd deleted it from his playlist, thrown out the music box that played it, because every note had felt like punishment. Now his daughter was remembering it in the same quiet tone she'd once used to ask for bedtime stories. Can you hum it for me? Alina asked, voice low and kind. Harper looked uncertain but nodded. The sound that came out was faint, barely a tune, but Elliot felt the entire world shift with it. Her little voice trembled, wavered, then found the rhythm. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. Tears blurred his vision. He turned away, pretending to check his phone, but his hands shook too hard to fool anyone. Alina's gaze flicked toward him briefly, acknowledging, not pitying, and then she began to hum along, filling in the gaps Harper couldn't. When they finished, Harper smiled, a small, exhausted smile, but real. She liked that one, she said. I know, Elliot whispered, his voice breaking. She really did. That evening, after Harper had fallen asleep with the bunny tucked under her chin, Elliot found Alina standing by the window, watching rain beat down the glass. The city lights made her reflection shimmer. Half angel, half ordinary woman. She remembers more than I thought she would, he said quietly. Children always do, Alina said. They remember what we try to forget. He came closer, drawn by something that wasn't gratitude anymore, but a slow, dangerous warmth. You have a way with her. I just listen, she said. People think children don't speak because they don't have words. But most of the time, it's because no one has earned their silence yet. He studied her profile, the steadiness, the lack of performance. Who earned your? He asked. Alina laughed softly, but it wasn't amusement. No one did, so I learned to keep it. Elliot didn't push. He simply said, For what it's worth, I'm glad you broke it for us. She turned to face him fully. Don't make me a saint, Elliot. I'm just someone who knows how it feels to be left in a quiet room and wonder if anyone will come back. Then you understand us, he said. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Outside, a neon sign flickered red and white, painting their faces in alternating color. Inside, Harper's steady breathing filled the silence. It felt less like an absence and more like a heartbeat. The next morning, Harper woke early. When Elliot came out of his room, she was sitting at the table with Alina, both of them eating fruit and whispering about something he couldn't catch. Harper looked up when she saw him, her face brighter than it had been in months. Daddy, she said clearly, confidently. He stopped dead. It had been nearly a year since she'd called him that aloud. The word hit him harder than any fortune or failure ever had. Alina smiled softly, not interrupting. Harper ran to him, arms outstretched, and for a moment he didn't care about Tokyo or the company or anything except the small, miraculous weight of his daughter against his chest. Good morning, sunshine, he whispered. Harper giggled. That's Mommy's line. She wouldn't mind me borrowing it, he said. When she went back to her breakfast, he turned to Alina. You're not just helping her. You're helping me, he said. I didn't think that was still possible. Alina met his eyes, steady and unreadable. You're both learning to speak again, she said. just in different languages. He wanted to tell her she didn't have to leave after the third day, that something in the space between them already felt like home. But he held it back. The promise of tomorrow was too fragile to touch. Instead, he just said, "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," she replied. "Healing looks like progress until the first goodbye." He didn't know what she meant then, but he would soon enough. Harper woke from her nap with the fierce concentration of someone returning from a place she'd chosen to visit. She padded to the table, bunny under one arm, and arranged 3 crayons like runway lights: blue, gold, pink. Alina slid into the chair beside her and didn't say a word. She simply set a sheet of thick paper down and waited as if the picture were already there and only needed permission. Elliot watched from the kitchenette, hands wrapped around a mug he'd forgotten to drink. The quiet in the suite felt different now, less like the emptiness after something breaks, and more like the pause people take before telling the truth. He'd learned in 2.5 days that Alina's best skill wasn't soothing. It was not forcing a moment to become anything it hadn't chosen yet. Harper drew a bird, the V shape gradually filling into a body with a determined eye. She added a sun too big for scale, gold pressed hard enough to leave a ghost circle on the table. Then she drew 3 small triangles under it, corners touching, and paused. "Who's that?" Alina asked gently, pointing at the 3rd triangle. Harper kept her eyes on the paper. "You," she said, as if reporting the weather. "So we don't fall." Elliot felt the sentence land inside him like a key finding its lock. He had spent a year keeping the lights on, paying the bills, proving survivals. He had not learned how to keep them from falling. They took the elevator down to the garden because the room wanted weather. The koi were lazy under a sky that couldn't decide what to do with its clouds. Harper crouched near the edge, balancing on the balls of her feet, and whispered to the bright fish they'd named Lantern. He surfaced like he'd been summoned. "Do you miss your flock?" she asked him solemnly. "Maybe he is the flock," Alina said. "Sometimes the brave one makes a flock out of whoever follows." Elliot looked at her. "Were you the brave one?" She didn't answer at first. She was watching Harper count to 8, skip 9, and land on 10 like a private superstition. "When I was 9, Alina said, I learned how to be quiet in closets." She said it without weight, the way people do when they've carried something long enough for it to become a familiar shape. "My mother had boyfriends who didn't see children. My grandmother arrived like a weather change and took me home. She called it keeping watch like it was a profession. Soup at all hours, nightlight on, even at noon. We will be boring," she said, "and I don't think anyone has ever saved me better." Elliot pictured a small girl on a heap of towels listening to a house decide what kind of night it wanted to be. "And when she died?" "I learned to fly." Alina smiled, not unkindly. "It looked like freedom. It was mostly altitude." "Does staying still feel like a closet again?" he asked quietly. "Sometimes," she admitted. Then Harper laughs, and it sounds like a door. They returned upstairs with damp cuffs and a leaf. Harper wanted to press in a book, So It Remembers Being Green. She placed it between pages of the bird story and clapped the cover close, satisfied by the small ceremony. When afternoon folded into that blue hour that makes even expensive rooms look human, Alina brewed tea and set a cup near Elliot's elbow. He realized she had learned to put things where his laptop used to open. He realized he hadn't opened it since the flight. Harper retrieved the photograph from under her pillow, the one of Claire in the hospital, hair unruly, joy unarguable. She placed it carefully on the table and smoothed the corner with a finger. "Mommy," she said, not like a wish anymore, more like a name on a mailbox. Elliot sat. He knew the room was waiting to see whether he would cross the thin ice he'd been tiptoeing for months. "Claire," he answered. The name came out clean. Nothing broke that hadn't already. "She sang to you," he added, the memory rising intact. "In the car, in the kitchen, at 2 a.m. when you didn't feel like sleeping because you were very busy being a person." Harper's mouth twitched. "The sunshine one?" Alina lowered herself into a crouch, elbows on the table, keeping company with the picture. "Do you remember how it goes?" Harper nodded, uncertain. She pressed her lips together and hummed a ragged line, then another. It was more idea than melody, but Elliot felt his chest change temperature. Alina joined, not performing, just offering scaffolding. Harper matched a note, lost another, found it back. Elliot added a low hum because that was all he had, and because doing it badly felt truer than staying out. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. By the second line, Harper's voice held steady. By the last, she was singing, real and small and entirely herself. When they finished, no one clapped. Harper leaned forward and kissed the corner of the photo as if blessing it. She liked loud flowers, she announced. Pink ones. Peonies, Elliot said. She called them loud like it was a compliment. Harper considered that. We should get some. We will, he said, and meant it as a promise to the past and to the flower shop. The spell broke not with sorrow, but with hunger. Pancakes for dinner? Harper asked, testing the brand new luxury of asking for something without triangulating a mood. Pancakes for dinner, Elliot said immediately, because he could. In the kitchen, Alina leaned against the island while he mixed batter. You didn't correct her, she murmured. Correct what? That she remembers the song right, Alina said. Even the parts she forgot. I don't have the energy to police grief anymore, he said. Then after a beat, thank you for not letting me try. They burned one pancake and turned the rest golden. Harper ate them like coins you spend on miracles. After dishes, done by hand because the machine seemed ruder than usual, Harper climbed onto the couch with her Bunny and the Fox book and asked for 2 pages and a true story. Elliot told her about the night she was born, the slow elevator, the nurse who tucked the blanket like origami, how he was too scared to hold something so precisely made. He told it better this time, and Harper asked the same questions she'd asked the night before, then fell asleep halfway through the answer she already knew. Repetition, he realized, was mercy in disguise. When he came back from tucking her in, Alina stood on the balcony, looking out at rain turning the city into a drawing. He joined her, grateful for the permission to be quiet next to someone who didn't mind quiet. She's remembering, he said. She's rewriting, Alina corrected. We all are. He wanted to ask about the closet and the soup and the nights that had taught her how to build stillness out of fear. He wanted to ask if staying with them felt like a risk she could afford. He wanted to say the thing his mouth kept deleting. I don't know if this is love, but I know it has the right temperature. Instead, he said, does it feel like a cage yet? Alina let out a breath he felt along his arm. Sometimes I look at my suitcase and my hands remember how to pack. That's all. Do you want to? The question came out soft and unarmed. I want to learn what staying looks like, she said. I also want to know that leaving doesn't break anything we've built. She glanced toward the bedroom where Harper slept with one hand open, palm up as if receiving. Children can smell fear of the door. I don't want her to learn it from me. He nodded. The honesty didn't sting. It steadied. We can write rules, he said. We can put them on the fridge like a manifesto. Start with one, she said. Tell the truth about the hard things. Don't edit them into something polite. He swallowed. Claire died on a Tuesday at 4:19 p.m. in a car that ran a red light 6 blocks from our house. I was in a meeting choosing a typeface for a product launch. I told Harper her mother was late because I didn't know how to tell her time was gone. Alina didn't flinch. She reached for his hand on the railing and touched it like a pulse. There, she said. That's a rule. They were quiet a while, long enough for the city to try on 3 different versions of its night. When Alina spoke again, her voice had the careful quality of someone placing a glass on a table without wanting it to ring. My grandmother used to hum when she didn't have words, she said. Not the Sunshine Song. Old Romanian hymns she didn't remember all the way. I think, she hesitated, then smiled at herself. I think that's why I knew to start humming today. The body keeps sheet music for you. The body keeps a lot we refuse to archive, he said. Then let's not refuse. Inside, Harper called out, one of those half-waking mumbles that demanded nothing and gave everything. They both turned. I'll go, Alina said, already stepping toward the door. She might need a glass of water she'll barely drink. Elliot watched her cross the room and felt something old and wary lift its anchor. It was the rarest thing that had happened to him in a long time. Wanting did not arrive with panic. Harper didn't want water. She wanted one more bar of the Sunshine Song, and then said, eyes already closing, Don't go yet. I won't, Alina whispered. She sat on the edge of the bed and kept watch like it was a job she intended to do well. Later, when the lights were out and the hallway held only the gentle theater of a house that had temporarily forgotten to be lonely, Alina returned to the balcony. It smelled like rain and the sea. Elliot could feel the choice gathering in her even before she spoke. 3 days, she said, half to him, half to the sky. We can renegotiate, he said, trying for lightness, missing it by an inch. She leaned her shoulder against the frame. I meant what I said about leaving, not breaking this. I need to prove it to myself. She looked at him steady. If I go and come back, will you still be boring? I'll defend boring like an empire, he said. A small smile. Good. They stood without touching for another minute and let the city say whatever it was always saying. Elliot felt the outline of tomorrow, the one with a note under a mug, and did not argue with the foreshadowing. Healing, he was learning, never moved in straight lines. It circled, it returned, it held, it tested, it kept watch. Inside on the table, Harper's drawing waited. 3 triangles touching under an impossible sun, a bird midair, a leaf pressed in a book to remember being green. On the nightstand, Claire's photo had stopped being a shard and become a window. The lullaby lingered in the room like a lantern. Morning would come, and fear would make its case. But tonight the house had a rule, and a child slept with her hand open to it. It rained the morning Alina left. Elliot woke to the sound first, thin cold drops ticking against the balcony rail, and then to the stillness that followed. Harper's bunny was on the couch instead of her bed, her crayon scattered across the coffee table, and next to the cold pot of tea sat a white napkin folded in half. He knew before he touched it. Her handwriting was neat, unhurried. Thank you for letting me be part of her story. Don't forget the song when the world gets loud again. The world did get loud. Immediately. Harper was at the window, staring down at the street below, her breath fogging the glass. She didn't say goodbye, she whispered. Elliot crouched beside her, searching for something, any word that wouldn't sound like betrayal. She had to go, sweetheart. But she promised? Her voice cracked halfway through the word, and he felt it like a blow. She said she'd stay till Thursday. She did, he said, though he wasn't sure if promises were measured in time or in how long they echo after someone walks away. Harper pressed her forehead to the glass. I don't like Thursday. They went through the day on autopilot, breakfast untouched, suitcases packed. He canceled his meetings without explaining why, told his assistant something about needing an extra day. Every corner of the suite held some trace of her perfume, her folded blanket, the half-empty jar of honey she'd bought because children like things that glow. He wanted to be angry. It would have been easier than understanding. But underneath the ache was a quieter realization. This was what he'd done to Harper all year. Walked away from the table, left rooms without warning, thinking the silence that followed didn't echo. By evening, Harper refused dinner. She climbed into bed early, eyes open in the dim light. You said people who love us don't leave, she said. Elliot froze. He had said that to convince her that Claire's death wasn't abandonment. Sometimes, he managed, they leave because they're scared. Was Mommy scared too? Yes, he whispered, but not of you. Then what? Of the day ending, he said. Of not getting enough time. Harper blinked slowly, like she was trying to memorize him. What's Alina scared of? He didn't have an answer, but in that moment he realized he needed to find out. Not for himself, but because his daughter's world had already lost too many constants. The next morning Harper wouldn't eat. She sat at the table in her pajamas, legs swinging, chin propped on her hands. Elliot poured milk, sliced fruit, made a joke about pancakes without the cook. Nothing landed. He tried to hum, You Are My Sunshine. Halfway through, his voice faltered. Stop, Harper said softly. It sounds wrong when you do it. He didn't argue. She was right. He called the airline by noon. Every reasonable part of him said this was a mistake. A grown man chasing a flight attendant who'd made her boundaries clear. But logic had never fed a grieving child. Narita Airport was the same as it had been days ago. Glossy, efficient, full of strangers moving like clockwork. He walked past rows of check-in counters, scanning faces, desperate for one that might turn toward him with recognition. Alina was nowhere. He asked the information desk. The attendant checked the crew lists, then nodded toward gate 46. Miss Taus is on the evening flight to Seoul. Boarding soon. Elliot ran. He found her near the gate, standing with her small carry-on, uniform replaced by a plain gray sweater. Her hair was down. She looked less like a flight attendant and more like someone trying to disappear into the background of her own life. She saw him before he spoke. Elliot, she said softly, almost a sigh. You shouldn't be here. I could say the same to you, he replied. His breath came out uneven. You left without saying goodbye. I wrote, she said. She can't read. That stopped her. Her shoulders lowered, and for a moment she looked like she might cry. But she didn't. If I said goodbye out loud, she said, she'd think it was forever. So she thinks it's her fault. Alina flinched. I didn't mean for... I know, he interrupted, but she stopped eating again. She keeps asking what she did wrong. Alina closed her eyes, fighting herself. Elliot, I can't stay. Why not? Because people like me don't get to stay, she said. We pass through. We help. We move on. That's what I know how to do. Then learn something new. The words came out rougher than he intended, but he didn't take them back. You taught her to hope again. You taught me how to listen. You don't get to undo that because you're afraid of being part of it. Alina shook her head. You don't understand. Every time I've stayed somewhere, it's fallen apart. I'm not a mother, Elliot. I'm not... She stopped. I'm not safe. He took a slow step closer. Neither was I, he said quietly. But I'm trying, and I think you already are. A voice announced final boarding for Flight 291 to Seoul. The line began to move. Alina's eyes darted toward it. I can't promise I'll know how to do this, she said. I'm not asking for promises, he said. I'm asking for presence. The crowd shifted, the sound of wheels on tile filling the space between them. She looked up at him, and in her eyes was the same expression Harper had worn that morning by the window. Half hope, half ache. Elliot, she whispered, please don't make this harder. She already did, he said. And then, Daddy! The word came from behind him, high, clear, terrified. He turned to see Harper running across the terminal, a security guard following helplessly behind. Her hair was wild, her sneakers untied, her bunny clenched in one hand. She threw herself at him, nearly knocking him off balance. You weren't there, she cried. I woke up and you were gone. Elliot knelt, arms around her. I'm here, sweetheart. I'm here. She looked past him and froze when she saw Alina. You came back, she breathed as if speaking to a ghost. Alina pressed her hands to her mouth. Oh, Harper. The child broke free of Elliot's arms and ran the last few steps. You forgot to say goodbye, she said accusingly. Then quieter. You can still say it now, but only if you come back later. Alina knelt, trembling. I wanted to stay, she said honestly. I was just scared. Mommy was scared too, Harper said. But she still sang. The simplest sentence, the most devastating truth. Something inside Alina cracked open. She reached out, touched Harper's cheek. You're right, she whispered. Then maybe I can try to sing too. The boarding doors closed with a soft hiss. The plane would leave without her. None of them moved. Harper leaned her forehead against Alina's shoulder. You can come home with us, she said. Daddy makes bad pancakes. Alina laughed, a sound that seemed to surprise her as much as it did Elliot. I believe that, she said. Elliot met her gaze over Harper's head. 3 days in Tokyo, he said. That's how this started. Let's see what 3 more look like. Alina hesitated only a moment before nodding. The drive back from the airport was silent, except for Harper's occasional humming in the back seat. The sunshine song, off-key but alive. Alina stared out the window, her reflection overlapping the passing lights. Elliot didn't try to fill the silence. For the first time, silence felt earned. When they pulled up to the hotel, Harper was asleep. Elliot carried her inside, tucking her under the blanket, Bunny by her side. Alina stood at the doorway, uncertain. She's dreaming, Elliot said softly, probably of you feeding koi. She shouldn't have to, Alina replied. Then don't give her a reason to. Alina exhaled. You make it sound simple. It isn't, he said, but it's possible. For a long time, neither moved. Outside, Tokyo glittered like rain trapped in glass. Finally, Alina stepped forward and brushed her fingers against Harper's hair. "Good night, sunshine," she whispered. Elliot's throat tightened. He looked at her, the woman who had arrived in his life at 30,000 feet, and somehow taught him what falling could mean without fear. "Welcome home," he said. San Francisco greeted them with its usual talent for contradiction. Blue sky you could almost believe in, while a wind from the bay insisted on a sweater. Harper pressed her nose to the car window and whispered the names of things as if baptizing them. Water, bridge, boat, gull. Alina sat in the front, hands quietly clasped, watching a city she didn't know yet step out and introduce itself. The house on the hill waited like a thesis. Glass everywhere. The kind of transparency that demands you perform your life beautifully or retreat to the rooms without windows. Elliot had designed it after his first big raise, when the future had seemed like an event you could RSVP to. Now carrying Harper over the threshold, he felt the house take inventory. A child's head on his shoulder, a woman's small bag, a pair of shoes not purchased for running. "Is this home?" Harper asked, not reverent, just curious. "It can be," he said, and wondered if the answer would offend the walls. They failed one thing immediately. The attempt to pretend discomfort wasn't present. The kitchen had knives that looked engineered by people who believed carrots should fear their fate. The island was a slab of perfect stone that had never heard forks clatter with laughter. The hum of the refrigerator sounded like a polite cough. Alina stood with her palms on the counter and said, "It's beautiful," in the voice you use for expensive dresses that won't let you breathe. Elliot opened a cabinet, closed it, opened a drawer, closed that too. "I forgot where things live," he admitted. "That's fixable," she said. "We'll teach the house." She turned and smiled at Harper. "First lesson, where the light goes." They started with a lamp, small, warm, stolen from a guest room that hadn't hosted guests. Alina placed it at the far end of the counter and clicked it on. The blue of the bay shifted to honey along the marble. She set a bowl beside it, filled it with lemons bought on the drive from the airport, because Harper declared, "Yellow helps rooms breathe." They unpacked badly, leaving a beautiful mess. The house watched, and if a house could exhale, this one tried. Elliot attempted pancakes the next morning because ritual had carried them safely across oceans. It deserved a chance across neighborhoods. The first circle tore, the second arrived pale and uncertain, the third found courage. Harper ate the mistakes on principle. Alina accepted an imperfect one with a grin that implied imperfection had finally been invited to stay. Then she built a corner. An armchair, dragged from a lonely library, faced the window. A soft throw turned the floor into an idea of grass. Crayons stood in a glass jar like a bouquet with ambitions. The bird book, the fox book, a thin volume with the sunshine song tucked in the back pocket. A philodendron with leaves like hands took up post beside the chair. On the refrigerator, at Harper's eye level, Alina stuck a small note. Pancakes. Walk, story, quiet, no times. The day could earn its schedule. "Whose corner is that?" Harper asked. "Yours," Alina said, "and mine when invited." "Bunny's too," Harper added, placing the rabbit with careful ceremony on the arm of the chair. "He listens." They took a walk the first afternoon, down a block that smelled faintly of eucalyptus and ambition. A neighbor waved, squinted, then waved again, trying to place who these people were inside their context. Harper collected 3 smooth stones and 1 stubborn feather. "For the window," she said, "so it remembers outside." Back home, she lined the stones on the sill like punctuation. The feather refused to behave, and somehow that helped. It wasn't all soft landings. Elliot left for the office, just 2 hours, and returned with 8 on his shoes. The house identified the old weather immediately. The door opening a beat too fast, the apology already forming. Harper looked up from the armchair, measured the clock with her eyes, and went back to coloring. Alina met him at the sink, no lecture in her face, only a quiet accounting. "Tomorrow," she said, "prove it then." The next day, he did, and the next, and then he didn't. Habits argued like attorneys. At 6:17 on Thursday, a board member called. At 6:19, Elliot said, 5 minutes. At 6:42, Harper placed her fork carefully on the tablecloth and excused herself without being asked. The chair across from her stayed empty like a lesson. When he came in at 6:51, the kitchen had been edited. 2 plates rinsed, a pot soaking. On the refrigerator, a new drawing in crayon, 3 triangles touching corners beneath a sun that looked ready to roll off the page. Behind them, the faint 4th triangle with a gold halo. Across the bottom, pressed so hard the letters left grooves. "You are home." Alina sat in the corner chair with Harper asleep against her, Bunny faced toward the wall for privacy. She didn't scold. She looked up at him with the patience of someone who had survived worse storms and would survive this one too. She waited, Alina said. Then she drew. Then she fell asleep in the waiting. Elliot read the sentence 3 times. Shame arrived first, then something steadier took its seat beside it. He put his phone in the drawer he used for batteries and manuals because that's where unreadable things belong. He washed his hands and cooked with a respect normally reserved for contracts. When the noodles were done, he set 2 plates, then a third later, reheated, because consequences can be honest and kind at the same time. After dishes, he sent a message he had been afraid to write. Evenings belong to my daughter. If it bleeds, I will come. If not, it waits. He turned off read receipts not to avoid accountability, but to avoid theater. He walked to Harper's room, tucked her blanket with the 3-count Alina had taught him, and whispered, I'm sorry. She didn't wake. He said it anyway because apologies are also for the speaker. They found a music class at a community center that smelled like mop water and birthdays. Harper held a triangle and learned the downbeat with grave concentration. That's your instrument, Alina told her. It's little and it tells the truth. On the drive home, Harper asked from the back seat, do kitchens have favorite songs? Alina said yes without hesitation. Elliot realized he believed it too. They planted a lemon tree because a child had said yellow helps rooms breathe, and because Alina had a theory that roots make promises, people sometimes can't. A gardener dug a square. Harper patted earth like a blessing. Elliot tied the stake with clumsy earnestness. It can be our barometer, Alina said. If it thrives, we're doing something right. If it sulks, we adjust. A sulk arrived on Tuesday in the form of Charles Whitmore's name lighting Elliot's phone. He let it ring itself into silence. Tomorrow, he said out loud, to Alina, to the plant, to the version of himself that used to sprint toward the voice that taught him important and urgent were synonyms. He touched the drawing on the fridge like taking an oath. Still, drift is persistent. On Friday, Elliot wore urgency into the house like aftershave. Harper looked at him the way sparrows look at cats, alert, hopeful, ready to bolt. He sat on the floor by the armchair without changing or reporting victories and said, What did I miss? Harper told him about a pigeon who had bullied a smaller pigeon out of a bread crust, and how Alina had narrated the whole thing like a courtroom drama. Elliot laughed. He felt the day surrender its case against him. Night was when the house finally began to sound like one. The dishwasher clicked, offended by loading techniques. The heater sighed. A neighbor's wind chime confessed to the breeze. One evening, Alina took the terrible bread she had been determined to perfect, sliced it open, and buttered it into goodness. We call that a save, she said. Harper suggested a fix. Elliot offered a redemption arc, and they all tried the phrases on and kept them all because families can afford synonyms. Progress announced itself in small proofs. Elliot began arriving at 6:22 in the present tense. He moved calls to mornings and discovered the world didn't end when he refused to split himself into more parts than a day holds. He set an alarm labeled, Turn Down the World at 6:15, and, after the 3rd evening, didn't need it. He started watering the philodendron without being asked. The plant responded with leaf geometry that looked like gratitude. On a quiet Wednesday, Alina stood in the doorway of the guest room, hand on the suitcase's handle, not pulling, not letting go. I need to know I can still leave and come back, she said, half question, half confession. I don't want my staying to be a hostage situation. Elliot nodded. 3 days, he said, borrowing the number that had started them and turning it into an agreement instead of a limit. 3 days, she repeated. Harper took the news like an engineer. She drew a chart with boxes. Takeoff, cloud, snack, landing, hug. We color as we go, she decreed. Alina kissed the top of her head and pretended not to cry in the pantry. The house missed Alina the way bodies miss rhythm. Elliot made pancakes and burned one on purpose for the dad plate, which made Harper smirk with approval. They sang the Sunshine Song without expertise and with enough tenderness to fool themselves into competence. Harper colored cloud after Alina texted a photo of a sky that looked like crumpled linen. She colored hug lightly in pencil, then erased it, then waited. Alina walked in at 6:22 on the third day. Harper didn't sprint. She set her pencil down, looked at the clock, and nodded like an inspector. On time. She handed Alina the chart and the pencil. You can color it. They ate on the patio because the lemon tree looked like it had been waiting for an audience. Alina told a story about a man who had asked her if turbulence was personal. Harper announced that kitchens like jazz. Elliot, whose heart had thudded like a dog behind a door for 72 hours, found he could breathe at a tempo the house now understood. After Harper slept, Alina lingered by the island. The lamp made the marble look almost human. You know he's going to call again, she said, meaning Charles and also the past. I know, Elliot said. He can have my mornings. He can't have my evenings. Alina traced the corner of the fridge drawing with a finger. She drew that the night you were late. I know, he said again, softer. It's the best reprimand I've ever received. Do I? She hesitated, the word catching on old gears. Do I live here? You have a key. He waited, then added, if you want another, there's a whole drawer of spares. We can label one flight, one garden, one quiet. She laughed, the sound small and bright. Label them all boring, she said. So I remember that's the goal. He moved to the sink to hide that his eyes had decided to be unprofessional. Outside, the lemon tree held its small green promises, like punctuation. The plant in the corner flexed a new leaf like a sentence finishing itself. On the refrigerator, at a height a child could read without help, the manifesto watched over the room that once pretended it didn't need one. You are home. The next morning, Elliot woke before his alarm and lay there listening to a house that had learned to breathe. Heater, wind chime, the faint thud of a small person's awake feet. He went to the kitchen and set the pan on the stove without looking at his phone. Alina came in, hair gathered, eyes soft with sleep. Harper appeared last, carrying the bunny like a deputy. We're getting good at this, Alina said, sliding onto a stool. We're getting practiced, Elliot corrected. Harper tapped the sticky note on the fridge. Pancakes, walk, story, quiet. After quiet, she asked, can I draw a new sun? Yes, they both said, at the same time. Chapter 6 of 7. The day began with sunlight crawling gently through the blinds, pooling in gold on the kitchen floor. It should have felt like peace. Instead, it felt like a pause, an inhale before something heavy. Elliot stood at the stove, stirring oatmeal that refused to behave. Behind him, Alina sat at the counter, flipping through Harper's drawings. Each one was a small world of certainty, stick figures smiling under exaggerated suns, 3 triangles always connected at the corners. But the most recent one was different. The lines were darker, heavier, the sky shaded gray. She's worried, Alina said quietly, holding up the paper. You can tell by the way she presses down too hard. Elliot looked over, frowning. About what? About you, she said. You've been distracted again. He wanted to argue, but the truth was right there in the silence between them. His phone buzzed on the counter, Charles Whitmore's name flashing across the screen. Alina's eyes followed the light. You should get that, she said, her tone unreadable. He didn't move. No, not right now. Alina folded the drawing carefully. You can't keep avoiding it forever. Elliot's jaw tightened. You sound like him. I'm not him, she said evenly. But maybe that's the point. You only ever listen when someone sounds like him. The words landed hard. Before he could respond, Harper ran in, Bunny dragging behind her. The tree's got a lemon, she announced, eyes bright. Alina smiled instantly. Really? Our first one? Harper nodded, already tugging at her hand. Come see. Elliot watched them from the window as they crouched beside the young lemon tree, morning light bending around them. Harper pointed at the small green fruit, chattering about how it was still shy. Alina laughed and tucked a strand of hair behind the girl's ear. He wanted to join them, but his phone buzzed again. This time, he answered. Charles's voice was as smooth and cold as the conference tables he preferred. You've been difficult to reach, Elliot. I've been with my daughter. That's admirable, Charles said, and somehow made it sound like criticism. But the board is restless. They're expecting you at the quarterly review. Tokyo's numbers are slipping, and they want reassurance you haven't gone soft. Elliot stared at the lemon tree through the window. Harper was pointing at something in the sky, Alina shielding her eyes to follow it. Maybe soft isn't the worst thing, he said. Don't be sentimental, Charles snapped. You have an empire to protect. The word empire made Elliot flinch. Once it had thrilled him. Now it sounded like a prison. I'm not coming in today, he said. A sharp pause. Excuse me? I'm done choosing numbers over people, Elliot said. If the board wants reassurance, tell them I'm building something worth keeping. He ended the call before Charles could reply. For a moment he just stood there, heart pounding, breath shallow. Then he opened the back door and stepped into the sunlight. Harper held the tiny lemon in her palm like a treasure. It's small, she said, but it's trying. Elliot crouched beside her. That's all any of us can do. Alina looked up at him, searching his face. You answered, she said. I hung up, he corrected. That's progress. She exhaled, half laughing, half relieved. Progress looks good on you. But the day didn't stay gentle. By evening, the email arrived. Formal, clipped, impersonal. Subject: urgent. Board directive. Charles had escalated things. If Elliot didn't attend the emergency meeting the next morning, he'd be removed from active decision-making until further notice. He read it twice, then closed his laptop. Alina was on the couch, Harper asleep against her shoulder. The lamplight painted her in amber and calm. Bad news? She asked softly. Expected news, he said. They're threatening to take everything. She nodded, thoughtful. Maybe they can't. He gave a humorless laugh. They own the company, Alina. No, she said. I mean you. Maybe they can't take you. He stared at her, unsure how to answer. I've spent 20 years building it. If they strip me out, what's left? She looked down at Harper. This, she said simply. The next morning, Elliot stood in front of the fridge, coffee untouched, Harper's latest drawing taped dead center. 3 figures under a sun that looked too bright for its own good. Across the bottom, you are home. It was a reminder and a dare. When the car came to pick him up, he didn't get in. Instead, he walked back inside, past the marble counters, past the rooms that had learned to breathe again, and sat down across from Alina. I'm not going, he said. She studied him. You're sure? He nodded. If I show up, I lose us. If I stay, I lose them. I know which loss I can live with. A long silence settled between them, heavy but not suffocating. Then Alina reached across the table and took his hand. Then we'll face whatever comes next together. By noon, the fallout began. The press release went live. Elliot Granger steps down as CEO of Whitmore Industries. It didn't feel like defeat. It felt like exhaling after years underwater. He took Harper to the park that afternoon. She ran ahead, hair flying, laughter ringing through the wind. Alina followed, camera in hand, capturing fragments of joy. A swing mid-air, Harper's smile tilted toward the sun, Elliot's face finally unguarded. When they got home, the first lemon had fallen from the tree. Harper picked it up reverently and placed it in Alina's hand. We did it, she said. Alina smiled. We sure did. Elliot looked at the small fruit, its color uneven, its surface imperfect. He thought about the empire he'd left behind, gleaming towers, flawless numbers, and realized that none of it had ever felt this real. That night, after Harper was asleep, he and Alina sat on the porch, the city lights sprawling below like a second sky. You know, she said, I used to think leaving was freedom, but it was just running. He turned to her. And now? Now staying feels braver. Elliot smiled faintly. I'm still learning. She leaned her head on his shoulder. We both are. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the hum of traffic and the soft rustle of the lemon tree. She's going to remember this, Alina murmured. Not the company, not the money, just this, the sound of us staying. Elliot looked up at the stars and thought about Claire, the woman who had once filled this house with laughter and light. He wondered if she could see them now, if she'd approve of the strange, quiet way they were learning to rebuild. "I think she'd be proud," he said softly. Alina smiled against his shoulder. "I think so too." For the first time in years, Elliot didn't feel haunted by the past. He felt accompanied by it, like a shadow that finally walked beside him instead of behind. Tomorrow would come with uncertainty, headlines, maybe even regret. But tonight, everything they needed was here. A sleeping child, a patient heart, and a single lemon ripening in the dark. They didn't set a date with a calendar so much as with a feeling. The lemon tree offered up a second yellow fruit, round and certain, and Harper announced, "The tree says today." The sky cooperated, blue with a few polite clouds, enough wind to make the borrowed string lights hum. There were no invitations, just a call to the judge, who had once accelerated paperwork for Elliot's sanity, and now agreed to decelerate an evening for his joy. No aisle either, just a throw blanket on the grass, a bowl of peonies on the patio table because Claire liked loud flowers, and the house watching through its glass, a little less aloof than when it began. Alina wore a simple dress the color of seafoam, thinking about shore. Elliot wore a shirt Harper had approved with serious gravity. "You look like a good sky." Harper herself wore white cotton with a lemon embroidered at the hem, because subtlety is for other families. The judge cleared his throat under the lemon tree. "Short is fine?" he asked. "Short is kind," Alina said. "We have bedtime." Elliot took her hands, palms warm, steady. "I used to measure love in speeches and sacrifices," he said. "You taught me it's better measured in pancakes and presents, and being here at 6:22 even when 6:23 looks easier. I promise to keep watch. I promise to be boring on purpose. I promise to say Claire's name and make room for her at the table where it matters. And when I fail, I promise to fail in the open." Alina's mouth trembled, then learned steadiness again. "I used to think leaving was the only way to stay safe," she said. "You and Harper made me love doorways that lead back in. I promise to fly without fleeing. I promise soup that smells like Sundays, and the hall light on at noon when the world is too loud. I promise to admit when I'm scared, and to hand you the fear like a lemon will slice in half." She exhaled a laugh. "I promise to keep watch too." "Rings?" the judge prompted. Harper stepped forward with a lemon leaf on her palm, two simple bands threaded through the stem. "Match," she said, and tilted her head at them both. "Any objections?" She paused just long enough to make the neighbors hold their breath. "Don't you dare!" They slid the rings on. The judge said words that sounded suddenly ancient and exactly right. Elliot kissed Alina in the way they had been practicing, without staging, without apology. Harper clapped once, solemn, then flung both arms to the sky like a conductor releasing a final chord. The lemon tree did what trees do. It stayed. They ate noodles at the kitchen window because tradition is a hearth you keep feeding. Harper insisted on 3 fortune cookies and opened them until she found the sentence that had been waiting for them. "You are exactly where you should be." She taped it next to her drawing on the fridge, as if the kitchen required documentation to ratify the moment. The next day arrived with errands, which is to say, proof. Elliot moved his suits to the far end of the closet and filled the space with sweaters he would actually wear. Alina put 2 new hooks by the door, one labeled wings, the other keys, because family is storage and language both. Harper redesigned the sticky note manifesto on the fridge, adding a new line in careful block letters. Song. The list now read, pancakes, walk, story, quiet, song, no times. Time knew its place. They told Charles on a Sunday because Sundays teach gentleness by example. He arrived with peonies, loud and pink as remembered. "She would have liked this," he said, standing in the doorway between the old country and the new. "She insisted," Elliot answered, and didn't armor the truth. Charles took in the lemon tree, the lamp's warm pool, the child's drawing that had become the house's north. He looked at Alina for a beat too long, the way men who believe in legacy look at revisions they didn't authorize, and then quietly said, "Congratulations." He did not mention the board. He did not ask about the press. He asked Harper which peony was bravest. She picked the one with the most petals and a slightly broken stem. He nodded as if educated. They took a photo under the string lights, Harper between them, the lemon tree performing earnest witness. The picture printed with too much contrast. It lived crooked on the fridge until Harper smoothed the corner like a collar before a school portrait. Routine flexed and held. Elliot discovered he could consult without disappearing, mentor without rehearsing power, show up without arriving late to himself. He started a morning habit of watering the plant in the corner, then the lemon tree, then topping off the humbler ritual of coffee. "You're a gardener now," Alina teased. "I'm an optimist," he said. "It's new." Alina took a short route back to the clouds because love kept its air license. A 2-day trip, then another. They made a chart again. Takeoff, clouds, snack, landing, hug. And Harper colored in each square like a liturgy. Alina boarded with a suitcase that no longer sounded like threat. She texted a napkin triangle and a lemon emoji from the galley. Elliot flipped the bad pancake for the dad plate, as required. At 6:22 on Thursday, the door opened. Harper didn't sprint. She held up the chart in a pencil like a baton. "On time," she announced. "Color it." The empire did not crumble without Elliot's nightly signatures. It learned to adjust, which is what empires do when reminded they aren't the point. Articles said what articles say. Friends called to whisper that he looked happier, then apologized for saying the quiet part aloud. A young engineer sent a note. "Thanks for choosing evenings. It helped me choose mine." Elliot taped it inside a cabinet where only he would see it when reaching for mugs, a private liturgy. There were small storms. Harper refused peas with a sophistication that suggested precedent law. The dishwasher staged a mutiny. A flight was delayed long enough to test the resilience Alina had been practicing. "I'm late," she texted from a holding pattern. Elliot replied with a photograph of the stove clock at 6:22 and 3 plates set, one covered with a towel. "We're on your time." The house did not hold its breath. It learned the long inhale of trust. Alina landed, opened the door at 8:03, and found the towel still warm. On an ordinary Tuesday, Elliot took Harper to the farmer's market. She chose lemons with an expertise that made the vendor ask if she was in the trade. "We have a tree," she said, "but we're not bossy." They met a musician playing "You Are My Sunshine" on a battered guitar. Harper tilted her head, then sang along without embarrassment. Elliot's throat did the old ache. It didn't close. He put $1 in the open case and felt like he had made a deposit somewhere the right kind of interest accumulates. In the evenings, they read the Fox book until its spine softened. Harper asked the same questions and invented new ones, because the brain heals by testing its edges. "Did Mommy like foxes?" "She liked you liking them," Elliot said. And when Alina squeezed his hand, he noticed he didn't apologize for the sentence's tenderness. Spring sprawled lazily toward summer. The lemon tree offered 3 fruits at once, as if trying out abundance. Harper picked one with both hands and presented it to Alina like a trophy. "Proof," she said. "Of what?" Alina asked, though she knew. "That we stayed," Harper answered, and then, almost as an afterthought that contained everything, "and came back." On a night that needed no agenda, they ate outside under a sky with opinions. Alina told a story about a passenger who asked if turbulence was personal. Harper described a pigeon that had bullied another pigeon out of a croissant and how she'd wanted to intervene with a legal strategy. Elliot laughed until he leaned back and the chair complained. The house listened, convinced. Later, after teeth and the 3-count tuck and the sunshine song whispered at a volume calibrated to sleeping houses, Elliot and Alina stood at the sink, sleeves damp, doing dishes like a thesis on partnership. "We're not glamorous," he said, leaning his hip into hers just enough to be a fact. "Glamorous is brittle," she replied. "I like how this survives the dishwasher." They stepped out to check on the barometer tree. The leaves lifted in a breeze that smelled faintly of citrus in the bay. A plane drew a thin line above them, a slow zipper on the night's jacket. "We can still look up," Alina said, "because promises are habits." "And down," he added, counting the reasons. Lamp glow, dish stack, the smudge on the marble the cleaners could never convince to leave because history resists erasure. "Mostly down," she leaned into him. "Do you ever think of the aisle?" she asked, a small smile in the words. "Every time we sit at this window," he said, "it's the same lesson from another angle." They didn't make speeches. They had already given them away to make room for sentences that could live on the fridge. They stood there and listened to the quiet practice itself. In her room, Harper rolled over and found the bunny's ear like a lighthouse. In the kitchen, the fortune cookie strip curled at the edges. On the refrigerator door, crayons shouted the truest map they knew. You are home. Morning would arrive with its persuasive cases, calendars, calls, flight times, the old sales pitch of hurry. They would answer with the economy they'd chosen. Pancakes first, then the world. Some days would go sideways anyway. That is how honest lives are. But tonight the lemon tree held their liturgy in its leaves. The sky stitched another plane towards somewhere else. Harper slept with one hand open, as if blessing arrivals. Alina rested her forehead briefly against Elliot's shoulder, and amen in the small language they'd built. And the house, invented once to be admired, remade to be lived in, kept its watch over all of it until the blue of morning made promises they now knew how to keep.